When it comes to economics, Viktor Orban is mostly wrong. But when it comes to issues that are not directly tied to economics, Viktor Orban tends to be mostly right. In this case, Viktor Orban's cabinet may actually end up shutting down the Central European University, which should actually be called the George Soros University. Now, is that a good thing? Let's explore. Hello everyone and welcome to the Freedom Alternative. Alright, before reading the news, a few things need to be said. First of all, 100% of the progressive activists in Eastern Europe have degrees and scholarships from exactly two places: Uppsala University in Sweden and Central European University in Budapest. And I say degrees and scholarships because those that don't study at any of these two are usually studying on a George Soros Open Society scholarship. That is the absolute norm. So with that in mind, let's read the news and then I'll clarify a few more things. Coming from the BBC, George Soros' university in Hungary is facing closure. And goes like this, quote, "Students and staff at the Central European University in Hungary are protesting against what they say are government plans to close it down. The university says new legislation proposed by the right-wing Fidesz government on Tuesday night makes it impossible for it to function. The CEU's founder and philanthropist George Soros has a strained relationship with the Prime Minister Viktor Orban. But the government says it supports the university and does not want it to go. Education Secretary Laszlo Palkovic said the proposed legislation followed a review of 28 foreign universities operating in Hungary, including the Central European University in Budapest. This is not an anti-CEU investigation and not against Mr. Soros," he said. The Hungary-born billionaire founded the university in 1991 and continues to fund it. He wanted the CEU to be a bastion of liberal thought and promote the values of an open society and democracy. But the university appears to have become the latest target in a campaign by Prime Minister Viktor Orban's government against liberal values. The government says the CEU and other foreign-funded universities are operating outside the law, and that the new legislation aims to create a new legal footing. The CEU, established and registered in New York State, is an independent private university for master's and PhD students from more than 100 countries. If approved by Parliament, the law would mean the university can only continue working in an intergovernmental agreement between US President Donald Trump and Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban is signed, and if the university establishes a campus in the United States by February next year. The first is unlikely. Both Mr. Trump and Mr. Orban are sworn enemies of Mr. Soros. The second is physically impossible. 27 other foreign universities will be affected by the legislation. Education Secretary Laszlo Palkovic told the BBC and all must abide by the new law. Only the CEU has no campus in its home country, the United States, but CEU Rector Michael Ignatieff said the university is fully legal and the new law has been designed to disable it. "We will defend our achievements vigorously against anyone who seeks to defame our work in the eyes of the Hungarian people," he said. The new rules would force the CEU to change its name, set up a campus in New York, change its curriculum, and become subservient to both the US and Hungarian governments. Protesting staff and students are now seeking the support of other universities, both in Hungary and worldwide. It comes at a time of deteriorating relationships between US President Donald Trump and Mr. Soros, who recently described the new occupant of the White House as an imposter, a political conman, and a would-be dictator. Relationships between Mr. Soros and Mr. Orban, a keen supporter of the US president, also became strained when Mr. Orban accused him of wanting a role in Hungarian politics and supporting the influx of migrants into Europe, an accusation which was true, something that the BBC is, of course, omitting. Mr. Orban recently claimed Hungary was under siege from asylum seekers. The Prime Minister won a scholarship sponsored by Mr. Soros to study at Oxford University, and the pair were allies in the days immediately following the fall of communism. But with the two now at loggerheads, NGOs partially funded by Mr. Soros' Open Society Foundation are under pressure to close in Hungary. Alright. First of all, the BBC shows its ignorance. It includes the fact that Orban was allied with Soros in early 1990s as if it's a contradiction or proof of hypocrisy or whatever. It's not. The fact of the matter is that in the early 1990s, George Soros did indeed fund several liberal initiatives, not just in Hungary, but all over the former Eastern Bloc. Most of these initiatives were really apolitical or liberal in the classical sense. For instance, one initiative that a friend of mine was part of was a series of classes to explain to young intellectuals how to sell the idea that jailing people for political disagreements is not a good practice. The point I'm trying to make here is that 25 to 27 years ago, Soros wasn't funding the lunatic fringe far left, nor was he funding mass Islamic immigration. In those times, Soros was funding, by and large, initiatives that were either good or really not that relevant. Many things, however, have changed since then, quite a bit. Soros has changed, and so did Mr. Orban. But Soros changed a lot more, or maybe he didn't change per se, but definitely the things he funds are radically different now when compared to 1992, for example. Now that's one thing. The second thing, is that leftists, whether Soros funded or not, are screaming at Orban for doing what they actually approve of doing in the United States. Let's not forget, these are the same people who profess to believe that Trump was elected because Russia intervened. There is no substantive evidence for that, but if you are to follow their logic, they want such interventions punished, and they at least seem to believe that no foreign force should be allowed to influence American politics. Oh, that's fine. The principle is quite sound, regardless of whether I myself agree or not. But then, if they profess to adhere to this principle, why are they berating Orban for trying to punish the foreigners who try to influence Hungarian politics and for attempting to impose the exact same general rule that leftists claim to desire for America, namely that no foreign force should be allowed to influence Hungarian politics? Because unlike the leftist case on Trump's election, the case that Soros is influencing Hungarian politics is very solid. The evidence pretty much speaks for itself, and I doubt even Soros himself would be in such a hurry to deny that he's trying to influence Hungarian politics. It is patently obvious for anyone with two brain cells to rub together that Soros is trying to influence Hungarian politics. Now, he's largely failing, but to say that he is not trying is to live in an alternative reality. So, two questions emerge from this. Well, actually, three. One, is this law really against the Central European University? 2. Is it legitimate, morally speaking, for a state to legislate to such an extent? And 3. Is it a free speech issue? And does it matter? And the short answers are 1. I don't care. 2. Yes, but it depends. 3. No, not really, but yes, it does matter. But no, seriously. Is this law really against the George Soros University? Well, no, not really. I mean, the whole case of the BBC relies on a trial of intent, basically. But as we always say here, intentions don't really matter. After all, the worst possible regimes were well intended. The Khmer Rouge, for instance, was killing people under the name of social justice. So judging things on intentions is not a good metric. The thing is that there is nothing there that can make the case that the law is made specifically to target the George Soros University. Now, the fact that Orban hates Soros is not good enough to make this case. The Prime Minister of Romania hates Soros too, or at least his party professes so. So what? That doesn't really mean anything. The harder question is the second one, on whether it is moral for the state to legislate to such an extent. And here's the thing. Mostly the answer would appear to be no. it's not really. But the CEU, the Central European University, has been operating legally for from 91, 26 years now. And so legislating further at least appears to be an overkill. However, times do change, and legislation tends to at least try to keep up with the changing times. In the current year, we understand a bit better than in 1991 how political influencing works. As a result, this becomes a national security issue, and national security is a legitimate role of the government. And to pretend that the Central European University is not in the business of political influencing is, once again, to live in an alternate reality. So, basically, the activities of the Central European University, including its ties with Russia and Kazakhstan and dangerous ideologues such as Alexander Dugin, a closer look by the state in the interest of Hungary's national security, is pretty much in order. Also, it is perfectly within the liberal framework of Hungary and all of the European Union, really, to want foreign organizations from outside of the European Union to be closer monitored. So from this point of view, a university funded as a PO box in New York State, i.e. outside of the European Union, should absolutely be under closer scrutiny. Now, I don't agree with this view, but this is what the practice of the European Union has been promoting for the last decade. So these pro-EU schmucks better get their narrative in order, because on this point, Orban is actually enforcing the spirit and the practice of the European Union rather than his quote-unquote evil right-wing agenda. Now, on the final question, the free speech issue. Yes, the free speech issue matters indeed, but I don't think it does apply here. Free speech does not mean freedom to award degrees that are recognized by the Hungarian state, because this is what's really at stake here. If this law passes and the Central European University doesn't confirm, it doesn't have to shut down. It will just be equal to, a bar. Namely, a place where people gather and talk about stuff and then award each other papers that no one else recognizes. So the freedom of speech and association of the Central European University employees and students is not trampled on. What is threatened is their privilege of having their worthless studies being recognized with a EU-wide valid diploma. Now, last time I checked, it is not a fundamental right to have your worthless diploma recognized. Sorry, that's just not how reality works. Moreover, even now, there are many employers, myself included, who outright throw resumes in the trash bin if they contain a degree from the Central European University. Why? Because we consider that place to be a trash factory, and trash belongs with trash, not with civilized and normal people. You are, of course, free to disagree with me, but the point I'm making here is that your shiny, accredited, and recognized diploma puts nobody under any obligation to a priori agree. So from that perspective, if this law passes, nothing really changes. Those who recognize the Central European University as something other than trash will continue to accept your shiny diplomas, and those like me will continue to disregard it. Ultimately, this whole brouhaha is a technicality, and it's a technicality that stems from the unreasonable premise on which the European university system is founded on. The premise being that the state confers a value to a degree, that the stamp of approval of a bureaucracy of the Ministry of Education of any country really is what makes the difference between a real degree and a fake degree. The premise is, of course, flawed. The very existence of the Central European University proves that the idea that this system is good enough to vet real degrees from bullshit ones is simply incongruent with reality. There are many private certificates and degrees awarded to graduates of various types of education that far surpass the quality of any accredited similar certificates and degrees. And the reverse is true as well. There are thousands upon thousands of accredited degrees all across the European Union who are worth literally nothing, even less than the paper that accredits them. So at the end of the day, if this law passes, it will force the mainstream to rethink their unreasonable focus on the kinds of degrees, and it will also put another nail in the coffin of the idea that universities are fundamentally a good thing and that young people should aspire to go study at them. The reality is a lot more complex than that. If this law does not pass, at the very least we get some fun in seeing the leftists squirm as they try to defeat the bill. But make no mistake, if this law does not pass, it will be because not enough Fidesz members of the parliament are convinced it's a good idea. The left is powerless on this, which is great. Now I do hope it passes though, seeing one of the two factories of Eastern European progressive activists being in deep trouble is something worthy of looking forward to. Not to mention that after it passes, we will be able to make not just the moral case, but also the legal case that the Central European University is a fake university. So that would in itself be a big win. Anyway, with all of that being said, thank you for watching, thank you for your continuous and generous support, and I'll see you soon on Freedom Alternative.